In this video, I'm going to share some of my favorite techniques for making beats with audio regions in the regions section of Logic Pro 10. Logic has some really good built-in tools for beat making. They have the drum kit designer, which replaced the EXS24. They have a built-in sampler. While these are great tools, I often like to work with audio in the regions section. It feels a bit more tactile and customizable, and it especially works for me because I'm very visual and I like to see the waveforms of the specific samples that I'm working with. I'm also not a huge fan of the choices that Logic makes for you, particularly with reverbs, buses, distortion plugins, stuff like that. I'd like to make those choices for myself. There are tons of good reasons to use audio regions for beat making in Logic, and I'm going to show you some of those now. Okay, tip 1, trim for grid and snap to absolute value. So if I go into Splice here, let's get a kick. I like this one. Drag that in. Now if we zoom in here, you can see obviously this is a super long file. So trim it down to the grid, assuming that your BPM is already set. It's going to get things really nice and tidy, so it's easy to duplicate these. Really important tip is to make sure that in your snap settings, it's set to absolute value, and that's going to snap it to the grid every time. So now if I duplicate this, it's going to go right on the grid perfectly. Tip number 2, individual dynamics. Now often in a real drum performance, not every single hit is going to be the exact same. And so it's good to regain individual elements. If you click up in the region section up here, I can gain this down. Let's try -5 dB. Sounds good. Get some hi-hats in here. I like this one. Drag this in, get it lined up with the grid. Now another option for individual dynamics, if you want 2 separate versions of the same sample doing different things, you can hold Alt and drag this down. And now let's say we want to pan one to the left and one to the right. And we want them to be alternating. I can move all these over here. I can gain these ones down. And now we'll get more dynamic performance on the hi-hats. And some panning going back and forth. Same goes with reverbs, whatever other effects you want to put if you want something different on each one. Tip 3 is delay swing. So another thing about humanizing drums is that they're rarely perfectly on the grid, and there's a really handy feature in Logic that allows you to keep it on the grid in your region view, but still delay it slightly so it stays organized, but you can add some swing. So if I want this kick to maybe hit a little bit late, if I open up my region section, click more, I can add a delay. Let's do something random like 17. Let's see if that helps a little bit. Let's do a little bit more. A little bit less. Sounds a little bit more natural. You can do the same with these hats. We can make these a little bit late. Make these even later. It's going to make the whole thing feel a little bit more realistic. Now let's get a snare in here. It's J Dilla snare. Get this resized. If you hold Alt, drag these over, you can duplicate it. Now we've got a pattern. Alt, drag that over, duplicate it. Do one more time. Tip 4, fades and join. Now sometimes you can have a sound that will end really abruptly and you'll get some clicks and pops. And you want to have some smooth transitions between your drum sounds usually. So what you can do is highlight all of your samples, go into the region section here, fade out, and just do something small like 10 milliseconds. That's just going to give some really slight fades here just in case there's any noise that you don't want left over. Another really handy way to do this, let's say there isn't a fade on this one. If you hold Control, Shift, and then click and drag the edge, you can create your own fade. You can also resize it by holding the same keys, and if you bring it down here, you can make a curve. Once you've got all of your samples set up and the fades on all of them, you can highlight all of them and hit J on your keyboard. And that's going to bounce them all. And now we have some incomplete loops. So what we can do is simply hold Command to bring up the marquee tool, grab some silence, hold Alt, and just place it at the beginnings and the ends. Now you highlight all these again, hit J. And now you've got loops. Tip 5, stretch regions. So let's say we want to change the BPM, but we've already made all these changes, made our loops. So let's change the BPM to 78, slow it down a little bit. Now these regions don't fit in our grid and they're not going to loop properly. So if you have them selected, hold Option, you can drag them out and let go. It's going to resize all of them according to the time with your new BPM. This is also helpful if you find a beat loop on Splice or wherever else and you really like it, but it doesn't fit the BPM for your song. Just drag it in, stretch it back down to fit. Tip 6, remove silence and split transients. Now let's say you made a mistake and you've already baked the cake. All the samples are in this one loop and you want to rearrange some stuff. There's a couple options. If you right click on one of the regions, you can click Remove Silence from Audio Region. And that's going to highlight all of your transients. And then if you hit OK, it's going to remove all the silence. So now you have all these kicks all on their own again. Another way to do this is to open up the Flex view and click on Slicing and Flex Time. And then while you're in this view, if you right click, you can click Slice at Transient Markers. And now you have individual kicks that have been sliced up by Logic for you. Tip 7, repeat, not loop. Now if you want this same beat to be going throughout your whole song, you can simply highlight all the tracks and hit Command R, and it's going to create repeating duplicates of the same loops for you. This is an advantage to just simply looping the tracks, because if you loop them, then you can't gain them and edit them individually. Another way to do this is to highlight all of them, loop them as many times as you want, and then hit Control-L, and it'll split them up into regions. Tip 8, gain regions dynamically. Most likely your choruses are going to be louder than your verses, and so you're probably going to want your drums louder in those parts. So let's say that this is your verse, and this is your chorus. You're going to want full volume in your chorus, but in your verses, you're going to want them a little bit quieter. So if you highlight all of your drum regions, you can go to the region section and gain them down. Let's do -3 dB. Tip 9, rename regions by tracks. So first what I like to start off by doing is creating a drum group by highlighting all of them, right-clicking on the tracks, and clicking Create Track Stack. Then you can make a summing stack, which allows you to add effects to the whole group. We can rename this drums, rename this kick, hat left, hat right, and our snare. Now if you hit Command A or select them all, however you want to, you hit Option, Shift, and N on your keyboard, it'll rename all of the regions the same way as your tracks, so you can easily see what's going on. Now to fill in this beat. So those are some of my favorite techniques for programming drums in the regions section of Logic Pro 10. It's not exhaustive at all. There's probably tons of other cool techniques that you could do with regions with drums. If you know of any techniques that I missed in this video, leave a comment down below. Let me know. Thanks for watching. See you in the next one.